Humanity's journey to the edge of the Galactic Council began long before their departure. It started when Earth was nothing more than a small, isolated planet in a vast, unknown galaxy. At first, humans were unaware of the existence of other intelligent life forms. Their reach was limited to their own solar system, and the universe beyond seemed like a mystery they could not hope to unlock. But everything changed when they discovered the first signs of alien life, a signal from deep space, intercepted by their most advanced telescopes. This was a turning point. What followed was a period of rapid technological growth, driven by the shock of knowing they were not alone. Within decades, humanity developed space travel that outpaced anything the galaxy had ever seen. They sent probes, then manned missions, to distant stars. And then, one fateful day, their first contact with another species occurred. It was a peaceful meeting, one that would change the course of history forever. The Galactic Council, an organization that governed over hundreds of species, welcomed humanity into their fold. At first, the relationship was one of mutual curiosity and respect. Humanity, eager to learn, assimilated knowledge from every alien species they encountered. The Council marveled at how quickly humans adapted, how fast they integrated new technologies, and how they seemed to push the boundaries of what was possible. In return, humanity benefited greatly from the shared wisdom of the more advanced civilizations. But as time passed, something shifted. Humanity began to see the cracks in the structure of the Galactic Council. The more they learned about the galaxy, the more they realized that the so-called peace was fragile, built on the uneasy alliances of species who secretly despised one another. There was constant friction within the Council. The Zorak, with their telepathic powers, often used their influence to manipulate decisions. The Shalak, warriors by nature, were more interested in strength and battle than in diplomacy. The Vorgan, an ancient race skilled in healing and intelligence, seemed disinterested in the politics of war and conflict. And the Grell, a race of calculating strategists, often placed themselves at the center of every political debate, eager to expand their influence. Humanity had seen it all. They had listened to endless debates, empty promises, and political maneuvering. At first, humans were content to observe, to learn, and to follow the Council's lead. They had no wish to challenge the established order. But as they grew stronger, as their technologies became more advanced, their confidence grew. They began questioning the decisions of the Council. Why were certain species given more power than others? Why were there so many divisions within the Council itself? Humanity had learned a harsh reality that despite the grand ideals of peace and unity, the Council was more about control than cooperation. The tipping point came when a major decision was made by the Council that threatened humanity's future. The Council proposed a massive restructuring of galactic resources, an idea that would strip human colonies of their newly acquired planets and resources in favor of alien species. This decision, made without consulting humanity, was seen as the final betrayal. Humanity had been growing stronger, economically and militarily, but they had not been included in this crucial decision-making process. Their contributions to the galaxy were immense, but the Council had acted as though humanity's voice no longer mattered. This was the moment of realization for humanity. The Council wasn't there to protect them. They weren't allies in the true sense of the word. They were a group of self-serving species looking out for their own interests, using the guise of peace and unity to keep the galaxy under their control. Humans had always been independent, had always fought for their survival, and they realized now that they could no longer rely on the Council for their future. They had to make a choice: stay and fight for a place at the table, or walk away and take their future into their own hands. The decision to leave wasn't made lightly. It was a monumental choice that had been discussed in secret among the highest levels of government on Earth. The leaders knew that pulling away from the Galactic Council would cause chaos, but they also understood that humanity had reached a point where they no longer needed to depend on others to shape their future. They had the technology, the resources, and the will to go their own way. The galaxy, they believed, would have to learn to live without them. And so the decision was made. Humanity would leave the Council. It was announced publicly, and the shockwaves reverberated across the galaxy. The Council's leaders, most of whom had underestimated humanity's resolve, were taken off guard. They had always seen humans as a somewhat rebellious species, but they had never anticipated this. They assumed humanity would fall in line, as it always had. But the truth was clear now. Humanity was no longer a small, insignificant player in the galaxy. They had become a force to be reckoned with. The news of humanity's departure spread like wildfire. Alien races reacted with a mix of fear, confusion, and anger. The Vorgan, the most diplomatic of the Council races, tried to reach out to humanity, but their messages went unanswered. The Shalaks saw this as an opportunity to gain more control, and they began to rally their military forces, preparing for what they believed was the inevitable collapse of the Council. The Zorak were the most vocal, declaring that the departure of humanity would lead to the downfall of peace in the galaxy. The Grell, as always, were calculating, watching closely for any signs of weakness they could exploit. The void left by humanity's absence created a power vacuum that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Without their presence, the Council became weaker, divided, and unable to function as it once had. Alliances started to fracture, and the Council's once imposing authority began to erode. It was as if the universe was holding its breath, unsure of what would come next. Humanity, meanwhile, turned inward. They focused on their colonies, reinforcing their borders, strengthening their defenses, and preparing for whatever might come. But they knew that the universe had changed. They had walked away from the Council, but the galaxy wasn't ready to let them go. There were whispers of a greater threat, something that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. But for humanity, the question remained. Had they made the right decision? Had they walked away from a crumbling empire? Or had they sealed their own fate? The universe was now in turmoil. The Council, once a symbol of unity and peace, was fractured beyond repair. And in the distance, the darkness was growing. The galaxy had never been more uncertain. Humanity's journey to the edge of the Galactic Council began long before their departure. It started when Earth was just a tiny, isolated planet, floating in the vast emptiness of the universe, unaware of the existence of other intelligent life forms. For centuries, humanity looked up at the stars, wondering if they were truly alone. But everything changed when they intercepted their first alien signal, a strange, cryptic transmission from the farthest reaches of space. The message was their first sign that the universe was far more complex than they could have ever imagined. With that single discovery, humanity was propelled into a period of rapid technological growth. They began sending ships to distant stars, and soon they found themselves in contact with alien civilizations. At first, the Council was curious about humanity. They saw the species as a wild card, young, aggressive, and full of potential. They welcomed humanity into the fold of the Galactic Council, a vast organization that governed the many species scattered across the stars. The Council was supposed to be a beacon of peace, where different races worked together to maintain order in the galaxy. For a time, it seemed like a perfect arrangement. Humanity brought new perspectives, new ideas, and above all, an unrelenting desire to progress. They quickly became one of the most promising members of the Council, their technology advancing at an astonishing rate, much faster than the older species had ever anticipated. But over time, cracks began to appear in the fragile peace of the Galactic Council. Humanity, with their boundless ambition and thirst for knowledge, began to question the decisions made by the Council. They were shocked to discover that the unity they had assumed was a facade. Beneath the surface, the Council was a place of constant tension and rivalry, where each species fought for dominance, each one looking out for its own interests. The Vorgan, the most intellectual species, frequently advocated for diplomacy and peace, while the Shalak, fierce and warlike, believed in strength above all else. The Zorak, who could manipulate minds with their telepathic powers, often used their influence to sway decisions in their favor. And then there were the Grell, the most calculating and secretive race, whose motives were always difficult to understand. It quickly became clear to humanity that the Council, though united in name, was divided in nature. At first, humanity tried to adapt. They made compromises, adjusted to the way things were done, and worked within the established order. They played the political game, trying to find common ground with the other species. But as time went on, humanity began to grow disillusioned. Their rapid rise in power had given them a sense of independence, and they began to see the flaws in the system. The Council's decisions were often driven by selfish interests, with little regard for the well-being of smaller races or even for the long-term future of the galaxy itself. Humanity, with its ever-expanding colonies and technological advancements, started to feel like an outsider in the very organization they had once hoped to join. They realized that the Council, for all its talk of unity and cooperation, was more concerned with maintaining the status quo than truly addressing the galaxy's problems. The tipping point came when the Galactic Council proposed a drastic restructuring of the galaxy's resources. The new plan would have seen humanity's colonies stripped of their most valuable planets and resources, all in the name of fairness to the other species. The Council had made the decision without consulting humanity, and the humans were outraged. They had contributed greatly to the Council's success, but now they were being treated as second-class citizens in a system that no longer valued their input. For the first time, humanity began to question their place in the galaxy. Was this truly the path they wanted to continue on? Did they want to remain a part of an organization that saw them as nothing more than a tool to be used by the more powerful races? As the Council's plans were revealed, so too was humanity's resolve. The decision to leave wasn't made in haste. It was the result of careful deliberation, long discussions, and a deep understanding of the risks. It was not a rejection of peace or cooperation, but rather an acknowledgement that humanity could no longer depend on the Council to secure their future. They had the technology, the power, and the will to chart their own course. They could no longer stand by and let the Council dictate their fate. With one bold move, humanity declared their independence, announcing to the galaxy that they were leaving the Galactic Council behind. The reaction was immediate, and it sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Alien races that had once seen humanity as a valuable ally were stunned. The Vorgan, ever diplomatic, tried to reach out to humanity, hoping to persuade them to reconsider. The Shalak saw it as an opportunity to assert their dominance, preparing for what they believed would be the collapse of the Council. The Zorak, always calculating, saw humanity's departure as a challenge to their influence, while the Grell, never one to show emotion, began plotting their next move. It was clear that the galaxy was not ready for humanity to leave, and without humanity, the Council, which had once been the center of peace and order in the galaxy, began to unravel. The void left by humanity's departure created a power vacuum that the galaxy had never seen before. The Council's once imposing authority was weakened, and the fragile alliances that had held the galaxy together started to fall apart. The races that had once worked together now turned against each other, each one vying for more power in the absence of humanity's influence. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was on the brink of chaos, and while the Council's leaders scrambled to find a way to salvage their crumbling unity, humanity, for the first time in history, was on its own. It was a bold decision, one that would shape the future of the galaxy in ways that no one could yet predict. Humanity had turned its back on the Council, choosing to strike out on its own. The universe, in turn, would have to adjust. What had been an era of relative peace now seemed uncertain. The galaxy, once held together by the Council's leadership, was now spiraling into turmoil. And in the distance, the darkness of the unknown was waiting to reveal itself. The question that lingered in the air, however, was this: had humanity made the right decision, or had they sealed their fate, stepping into a future that would bring far more danger than they were prepared for? Only time would tell. As the days passed, the universe held its breath. Humanity's departure from the Galactic Council was a monumental event, one that would have ripple effects across the galaxy. In the wake of their withdrawal, there was a deep sense of uncertainty. The once stable order was no more. The Council had depended on humanity to maintain a balance of power, and now that balance was gone, the remaining species of the galaxy were scrambling to understand what the future held. Would humanity's bold decision lead to a new era of peace, or would it unravel the delicate fabric of the galaxy? The reaction from the other species was swift, though varied. The Zorak, always keen on maintaining their telepathic influence, were the first to react. They saw humanity's departure as a dangerous move, one that could lead to the dissolution of the Council's authority. For centuries, the Zorak had used their mind powers to manipulate decisions, but they knew that the loss of humanity's support would shift the balance of power in their favor. They began to rally their forces, preparing for what they saw as an inevitable conflict. Their message was clear: the galaxy was on the brink of war, and humanity's absence was a signal that they could no longer rely on peaceful diplomacy. The Shelak, warriors through and through, were quick to interpret humanity's withdrawal as a sign of weakness. They believed that if humanity thought they could leave the Council and survive on their own, they were sorely mistaken. The Shelak had long seen themselves as the true power in the galaxy. With their incredible combat prowess and brutal tactics, they had little regard for diplomacy. For them, strength was everything. They were already preparing for a future where they could assert their dominance over the galaxy, and humanity's departure only made them more eager to prove their superiority. Meanwhile, the Vorgan, known for their wisdom and deep understanding of the universe, were divided. Some Vorgan leaders saw humanity's departure as a catastrophic event, one that threatened the fragile peace of the galaxy. The Vorgan had always believed in the power of knowledge and reason, but they now feared that without humanity's technological contributions, the galaxy could fall into chaos. Others within the Vorgan saw the situation differently. They believed that humanity had made the right decision by rejecting the Council's corruption. They began to reach out to humanity in secret, hoping to form an alliance that would challenge the existing order of the galaxy. The Grell, ever the schemers, remained silent for the most part. They were always calculating, always waiting for the right moment to strike. Humanity's departure had left the galaxy in a state of confusion, and the Grell were watching closely, analyzing every move the remaining species made. They knew that in times of uncertainty, opportunities arose. The Grell were not concerned with the immediate chaos caused by humanity's departure. They were focused on the bigger picture. They saw this as a chance to reshape the galaxy to their liking. The Grell believed in power through strategy, and now, with the Galactic Council weakened, they were ready to make their move. Back on Earth, humanity itself was in a state of intense reflection. The decision to leave the Council had been made, but the reality of their choice was just beginning to sink in. Humanity had been part of the Council for centuries, and leaving was not a decision they took lightly. But in their hearts, they knew it was the right one. The Council had shown its true colors. It was a place where alliances were forged out of necessity, not shared ideals. A place where peace was a fragile illusion, held together by political maneuvering and empty promises. Humanity had left because they no longer believed in the Council's ability to protect them or secure their future. But even as they prepared to face the unknown, there was a growing sense of dread. It wasn't just about leaving the Council. It was about what lay ahead. The universe, which had once seemed so vast and filled with possibilities, now felt more like a dangerous, unpredictable place. Humanity had always been a species that thrived on its independence, but now, in the face of this uncertain future, the weight of their decision began to feel heavier than ever. They had withdrawn from the Council, but in doing so, they had also isolated themselves from the very beings that had once been their allies. As the days turned into weeks, humanity began to focus on strengthening their own defenses. Their colonies, once peaceful, now had to be fortified against the potential threat of alien aggression. The human fleet, a powerful force in its own right, began mobilizing. The leaders of Earth knew that they couldn't afford to be complacent. They had made an enemy of the Galactic Council, and while many of the races were still uncertain about how to respond, others were already preparing for confrontation. The universe was about to change, and humanity needed to be ready. Meanwhile, the alien races that remained in the Galactic Council were divided. Some saw the human departure as a loss, a blow to the ideal of unity that the Council had tried so hard to maintain. Others, like the Shalak, saw it as an opportunity to increase their own power. The Vorgan, ever the thinkers, began to theorize about what humanity's departure meant for the future of the galaxy. They understood the potential dangers of a galaxy without humanity, but they also saw a chance to forge a new order, one where knowledge and wisdom would take precedence over power. But in the distance, something more dangerous was stirring. The galaxy's leaders could feel it, even if they couldn't explain it. There were whispers of an ancient force awakening, something far older than the Council itself. The departure of humanity had triggered a shift, one that the galaxy was not prepared for. This unseen threat began to grow, its presence felt but not understood. And in the midst of this uncertainty, humanity, now isolated, had to decide if they were ready to face the coming darkness, whatever it was. The decision to leave the Galactic Council had set off a chain reaction, one that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The universe was no longer the place it once was. The power structures were changing, and no one knew where it would all lead. What was clear, however, was that humanity had sparked something bigger than themselves, a conflict that would spread throughout the stars, and one that would force all to reckon with the consequences of their actions. The collapse of the Galactic Council was just the beginning. The universe had changed in the wake of humanity's departure, and now the galaxy was in a state of complete turmoil. What had once been a fragile peace among the various species of the Galactic Council was quickly disintegrating into a chaotic, unstable web of political maneuvers, military buildups, and a palpable sense of fear. The departure of humanity, a species that had become so influential and vital to the Council, left a void that no one was prepared to fill. As the weeks turned into months, the galaxy became a place of uncertainty, where alliances faltered and threats loomed on every horizon. The Zorak were the first to make their move. Once known for their calm and rational nature, they had always used their telepathic powers to subtly influence decisions in their favor. But with humanity's sudden exit from the Council, they now saw an opportunity to dominate. They began rallying their forces, spreading propaganda that painted humanity's withdrawal as an act of rebellion, one that could threaten the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. Their message resonated with several of the smaller species, who feared the sudden shift in power and the potential for chaos. The Zorak positioned themselves as the only force capable of holding the galaxy together, offering their leadership to any species willing to follow. It was a political power grab, disguised as a plea for unity, and many saw through it. But there was no denying that the Zorak had the strength and the resources to make their vision a reality. Meanwhile, the Shalak, a race of fierce warriors, saw the situation in an entirely different light. To them, humanity's withdrawal wasn't a tragedy. It was an invitation for war. The Shalak believed that power was the only true path to peace, and their way of achieving peace was through conquest. With the collapse of the Council, they saw a galaxy ripe for the taking. Their military was formidable, their ships large and capable of devastating destruction. They began to organize their forces, marching through star systems and intimidating weaker races into submission. The Shalak's message was simple: the galaxy would be better off under their rule, and they were willing to fight for it. While the Zorak and the Shalak prepared for conflict, the Vorgan were quietly observing. Unlike the Zorak and the Shalak, the Vorgan had always prided themselves on their intelligence and wisdom. They were not a race that sought dominance through brute force or manipulation, but instead relied on their deep knowledge of the universe. Yet even they couldn't ignore the fact that the galaxy was spiraling into chaos. Some of the Vorgan began to question whether the Galactic Council had truly served the galaxy's best interests. They recognized the dangers of a divided universe. but they also saw an opportunity to guide the galaxy into a new era. The Vorgan reached out to humanity, hoping to forge an alliance that could restore balance and prevent the galaxy from descending into an all-out war. As tensions grew, the Grill, the most secretive and calculating race in the galaxy, bided their time. They had always been adept at watching and waiting, making moves when the time was right. They were the unseen hand behind many of the galaxy's most important decisions, though few ever knew it. Now, with the Council on the brink of collapse, the Grell were analyzing the shifting political landscape, looking for weaknesses in their rivals' plans. They knew that the galaxy's instability would eventually create opportunities, and they were more than prepared to exploit them. The Grell weren't concerned with diplomacy or war for the sake of war. They were concerned with power. Whoever could control the galaxy's resources and influence would hold the ultimate advantage, and the Grell intended to be the ones who controlled it. In the midst of all this chaos, humanity was facing a crisis of its own. Back on Earth, and within their colonies, there was no consensus on how to handle the growing instability. Many feared that the departure from the Council had been a rash decision, one that would eventually lead to humanity's downfall. The galaxy, now full of enemies and divided by fear, seemed like a place where survival would be an impossible task. Humanity had always been resilient, but now they were testing their limits. The human fleet, once a symbol of unity, was being divided. Some advocated for preparing for war, strengthening defenses, and readying for whatever threat might come. Others called for diplomacy, hoping that alliances could be forged with the Vorgan and other neutral factions before it was too late. The leaders of Earth knew that there was no going back. The decision to leave the Council had been made, and the consequences were already being felt. They could not undo the choice, but they could shape the future. In secret meetings, military strategists, diplomats, and scientists began to prepare for the worst-case scenario. They fortified their borders, developed new weapons, and began building relationships with those races that still believed in peace. At the same time, they kept a close eye on the growing threats from the Zorek, Shellac, and other factions that might want to take advantage of humanity's newfound isolation. But despite their preparations, humanity couldn't shake the feeling that a darker force was on the horizon. There had been whispers in the deep corners of the galaxy, rumors of something ancient and malevolent stirring in the shadows. The kind of threat that no military might, no alliance, could possibly overcome. Humanity, alone and without the protection of the Council, would have to face whatever this darkness was head-on. The stakes were higher than ever before. Across the galaxy, alien leaders, those who were once allies of humanity, watched with growing concern. They could feel the shift in the universe, the unsettling energy that accompanied the breakdown of the Galactic Council. Some feared that the galaxy was entering a new age of darkness, where power would be seized by the strongest and most ruthless. Others, like the Vorgan, held out hope that a new order could emerge from the chaos. But for many, the question loomed: would the galaxy ever know peace again, or was it too late to stop the coming storm? As the days went by, the universe seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. Humanity had left the Council, and the galaxy had fractured in its wake. The factions were preparing for conflict, alliances were shifting, and the unknown threat in the distance was growing stronger. The pieces were being set, and soon the galaxy would be forced to confront the consequences of humanity's bold decision. The question was no longer whether the galaxy would survive, but whether humanity itself would. The galaxy teetered on the edge of collapse, and the once stable structures of power seemed to crumble under the weight of mounting fear and uncertainty. Humanity's decision to leave the Galactic Council had set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The fragile alliances that had held the galaxy together were now fracturing, and the races that once coexisted in a delicate balance were quickly turning against each other. The Zorak, the Shellac, the Grell, and even the Vorgan, all were preparing for a future that had no place for the peace they had once promised. In the wake of humanity's departure, it became clear that the galaxy was more divided than ever. The Zorak, eager to seize the moment, began to take control of key star systems, using their telepathic influence to manipulate smaller races into submitting to their rule. They saw this as an opportunity to reshape the galaxy in their image, to bring about a new era of control where their minds, not the ideals of peace, were the supreme force. They sent emissaries to the remaining races of the Council, pushing for support in their campaign to bring the galaxy under their rule. The Zorak spoke of unity, but their message was built on the foundation of control and domination. The Shalak, on the other hand, saw humanity's withdrawal as a challenge to their authority. They had long believed in the supremacy of strength, and with the Council's collapse, they saw a chance to impose their brutal brand of order on the galaxy. The Shalak fleet, already one of the most fearsome in the galaxy, began to move toward the core worlds. Their warships, massive and imposing, began to take position around key star systems. The Shalak, with their warrior mentality, were ready for the battle they believed was inevitable. They did not fear war. They embraced it. For them, humanity's absence meant there was no one left to challenge their might. Meanwhile, the Grell watched in silence. Ever the opportunists, they saw the shifting power dynamics as an opportunity to strike from the shadows. The Grell were not interested in open war or the chaos of direct confrontation. They preferred subtlety, manipulation, and the long game. They had no intention of rushing into battle like the Zorak or the Shalak. Instead, they worked behind the scenes, quietly pulling strings and forging alliances with those who had yet to commit to either side. The Grell understood that in times of conflict, there was always room for someone to take control in the quietest way possible. They bided their time, knowing that eventually the galaxy would return to them. The Vorgan, deeply divided, were once again the intellectuals of the galaxy. Some of their leaders, horrified by the potential consequences of humanity's departure, sought to restore the Galactic Council. They worked tirelessly, trying to find a way to bring the various factions back to the negotiating table. But there were others among the Vorgan who saw humanity's withdrawal as a sign of a greater truth, that the Council had failed, that the galaxy needed a new form of governance. These Vorgan believed that humanity's departure was the first step toward a galaxy that was no longer controlled by political elites or corrupt power structures. The Vorgan were not a people given to rash decisions, but even they could see that the galaxy was in danger of descending into an era of endless conflict. Yet their efforts, for the moment, seemed futile. The galaxy was no longer listening. For humanity, the decision to leave the Galactic Council was already proving to be more complicated than they had ever imagined. Although they had charted their own path, they now found themselves caught between a galaxy on the brink of war and the uncertainties of their own future. Earth and the colonies had been working tirelessly to secure themselves from the growing threats, building stronger defenses and forming secretive alliances with the Vorgan and others who still believed in peace. But the shadow of war loomed ever closer. Humanity had prepared for conflict, but the scale of what was coming was overwhelming. They knew that they could not face this war alone. They needed allies, but most races now saw humanity as an outsider, either a threat or a fading memory of what the Council once was. Some species still looked to humanity with admiration, but others had already turned their back on them, their former alliances now meaningless in the face of rising power struggles. At the same time, the whispers of a greater, darker threat began to grow louder. There had been scattered reports of strange anomalies in the outer reaches of the galaxy, of unexplained disappearances of ships, and of a presence that felt like nothing humanity had ever encountered before. The scientists and military leaders of humanity were quick to dismiss these rumors as nothing more than fear-mongering, but there was a sense among those who had the ear of the government that something terrible was coming, something older than the Galactic Council itself. No one knew what it was, but the fear that gripped those who dared to speak of it was enough to shake even the most seasoned leaders. Humanity's growing isolation meant that they would face this new threat alone. They had left the safety of the Galactic Council, but now, as the shadows of the unknown began to close in, they realized that their decision had far-reaching consequences. Would they be able to stand against this darkness, or would the galaxy's refusal to work together spell their doom? The question lingered, unanswered. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued to fall apart. With each passing day, the various factions of the galaxy grew more entrenched in their own beliefs. The Shellick pressed for war, the Zorak sought to dominate, and the Vorgan searched for a way to restore order. As the old alliances crumbled, the galaxy itself began to spiral into chaos. The universe seemed to be on the brink of a new age, an age of conflict, where power was seized through war and manipulation. There was no longer any sense of a unified galaxy. Each race, each species, fought for their own survival and dominance. Humanity, once a shining example of progress and cooperation, was now a rogue force in a galaxy that had no place for them. Yet, amid all the chaos, there was one undeniable truth. Humanity had set a new course for itself. They had left the Galactic Council, but they had not abandoned their ideals. They were determined to shape their own future, to build a new way of life in the galaxy, free from the constraints of a corrupt system. But with every decision came a price, and as the galaxy teetered on the edge of war, humanity found itself forced to reckon with the consequences of its choices. As the stars burned in the distance, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The events set in motion by humanity's departure were only just beginning. What was clear, however, was that this was no longer a galaxy of peace. This was a galaxy on the brink of something far more dangerous, a galaxy that would either unite against a common enemy or tear itself apart in the struggle for control. And humanity, now standing alone, would have to decide which side of that future they wanted to be on. The question that haunted every mind across the galaxy was no longer whether peace was possible. It was whether the galaxy would even survive. The universe was on the verge of an irreversible transformation. As humanity's departure from the Galactic Council set the galaxy into a frenzy, it became clear that the once stable structure was no longer functional. What had once been a place of diplomacy and cautious peace had now devolved into a battleground of ideologies and ambitions. Each race was scrambling to gain advantage, and every move seemed to push the galaxy closer to the brink of war. Yet, despite the growing tension, something far greater was stirring in the distant corners of the universe, a force that none of the factions could fully comprehend nor prepare for. The Zorak, having rallied their supporters, sought to solidify their position. They had always believed that unity through control was the only way to preserve order. Now, with humanity gone, they saw a unique opportunity to manipulate the remaining species into forming a new galactic council, one that would be governed not by ideals of equality, but by their mental supremacy. They began to exert more influence, reaching out to the smaller factions with promises of protection and stability, all while slowly tightening their grip on power. The Zorak were experts at planting seeds of fear, and they used every opportunity to stoke the flames of uncertainty. Without leadership, without humanity, this galaxy will fall into chaos, they warned. We are the only ones who can restore order. Despite the mounting propaganda, the Shellick saw only one path forward: domination. Their warriors were unmatched, and with the Council's collapse, the galaxy was ripe for the taking. Their ships moved in greater numbers, their borders expanding as they claimed more star systems. The Shellick had no interest in negotiations or alliances. They wanted conquest. They viewed the collapse of the Council as the first sign that they were destined to lead, to rule the galaxy as they had long believed they should. Strength was their currency, and they would take it by force if necessary. Their leaders spoke of a new era, one where only the strongest would survive. The galaxy will be ours, they declared, and only those who accept our strength will be spared. For the Grill, the opportunity was much subtler. They saw the unfolding chaos as a perfect time to maneuver behind the scenes, making alliances with whoever would offer them the best chance of gaining control. Unlike the Zorak and the Shellick, the Grill understood that power was not always wielded openly. It could be built from the shadows. They began secretly meeting with neutral factions, offering technological advancements in exchange for strategic alliances. They whispered promises of a better future, one where the Grell would be the unseen rulers, manipulating the galaxy's events from behind a curtain. The Grell knew that when the dust settled, they would be positioned to rule not through force, but through influence. But amidst all the political maneuvering and military posturing, the Vorgan remained the most philosophical of the galactic powers. While some Vorgan leaders feared the future, others began to question the very idea of the Galactic Council. Had it really been a force for good, or was it just a mechanism of control that limited the galaxy's true potential? These Vorgans saw humanity's departure as a sign of a new era, one that could be shaped by wisdom, by knowledge, not by brute force or mental manipulation. A few of them secretly reached out to humanity, believing that perhaps the time had come to rebuild the galaxy from the ground up, creating a new order that would bring peace through understanding. However, not all Vorgans shared this sentiment. Some, especially the more conservative factions, still saw the need to preserve the Council's structure. They feared that without some form of unity, the galaxy would descend into chaos. They believed humanity had made a grave mistake, and they began to openly criticize their departure. "We warned them," they would say, "that walking away from the Council would lead to disaster. Now we must unite to restore order before it is too late." But even among the Vorgan, their words began to ring hollow as the divisions between them grew. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity faced the consequences of their bold decision. With the galaxy in turmoil, Earth found itself increasingly isolated, even as it fortified its defenses and expanded its fleet. The colonies, once distant and secure, were now the most vulnerable targets in the galaxy. Humanity had never anticipated that the very act of leaving the Galactic Council would push them into the center of the galaxy's most dangerous conflict. The human fleet, though powerful, was not infinite, and supplies were running low. Earth's leadership knew that it could not survive this conflict alone. And yet, they refused to compromise their decision. They had left the Council for a reason, to build a future where they could chart their own course, free from the corruption that had festered within the Council's walls. But as the war drums grew louder, humanity knew that the future was no longer certain. Across the galaxy, the other species continued to prepare for conflict. The smaller races, once protected by the Council's agreements, now found themselves caught in the middle of the shifting tides. Some, like the Elysians, tried to remain neutral, but the fear of being swept up in the storm was palpable. If the Zorak succeed, they whispered, we will be nothing more than pawns in their game. If the Shalak win, we will be wiped out in the first wave. No one seems safe. Even the Vorgan, once thought to be the greatest minds in the galaxy, were unsure of their next steps. Their secret meetings only deepened the sense of impending doom. Each faction, driven by its own needs, pushed the galaxy toward a tipping point. The darkest of the rumors, however, were starting to take shape. It wasn't just the Zorak or Shalak or even the Grell that were troubling the galaxy. In the farthest reaches of space, far beyond the territories of known civilizations, something ancient and malevolent was awakening. It had remained hidden for millennia, its existence forgotten by all but the oldest species. And now, in the wake of the Council's collapse, its presence was being felt. Whispers of it reached every corner of the galaxy. The power that had once been so deeply feared was stirring once more, and it was no longer willing to stay in the shadows. Humanity, isolated and embattled, was beginning to sense this new threat. The reports from the deep space expeditions were vague, but there was an undeniable shift in the cosmic balance, a dark presence that grew stronger with each passing day. The fear that had settled over the galaxy was not just from the rise of factions vying for power. Something much more ancient and much more dangerous was drawing closer. And so, as the galaxy spiraled toward war, humanity stood at a precipice. Would they be able to survive this galaxy-wide conflict and the looming unknown darkness, or would they, too, be consumed by the very chaos they had hoped to escape? In the final moments, it was clear that the galaxy was no longer simply divided. It was about to be tested by something far greater than any of them had ever anticipated. The Galactic Council was gone, and in its place stood a fractured, desperate universe, waiting for the inevitable clash that would determine its fate. And at the heart of it all, humanity would have to decide whether to continue fighting for independence or to face the darkness that was gathering in the void. The question remained, could they survive the storm, or would they, too, be lost in the wake of the galaxy's collapse?